Hi, everyone. Good morning. Happy Wednesday and welcome to the Upper School information session. I know all of you are current Carroll parents and you know the way that we sort of do these things. This event, actually, what we're going to do is it's going to be webinar format so that Kate Collins, our upper school division head, she's going to give a presentation. And then what we're going to do is kind of open it up for your questions and make it much more of a conversation. So feel free to hang on to your questions, to chat out some questions that we can get to at the end, whatever feels right for you. And we look forward to hearing more from you. And without further ado, Kate Collins.
Thank you, Stacy. I was very ready, and then I muted myself just as you said that, and then I couldn't find the unmute button, which was awesome, and hopefully not an indication of the confidence that you all have in me on this presentation. So welcome, and I am gonna just dive in, and I also am maybe just talk a bit as we give people a chance to arrive. If you're anything like me, sometimes an on-time arrival, even via Google or Zoom, can be a struggle in the morning in particular. So as Stacy mentioned, I am Kate Collins and I am the head of the upper school. This is my second year at Carroll and my 19th year in independent schools. I actually started 19 years ago at Landmark. So I came from a foundation in the LBLD school environment and then spent a large chunk of time at a local independent school, day and boarding school. In much of my time there as the director of academic support and the ninth grade dean. Most of my, in those two roles, in my opinion, go so close hand in hand and are so closely tied together. And partly because we are in a world of high school transition where thinking about academic support isn't about students who are going to struggle, but basically that when a student struggles, because it's a when, that there are people around them to be there to support. I had the mentality that all 180 of my ninth graders would struggle at some point in the transition to high school, and that we were going to be giving them the skills to adapt and make that transition. That is much of what is happening here in the upper school and what I'll be talking with you today about. For today, I have broken our conversation really into this kind of who, what, why, how conversation. And I'm just going to dive in. And I also will say where. It's not on the agenda, but the picture is there. That is the upper school campus, the building that we are in. I'm sitting in it right now. In fact, that to the right of that picture, there's a little office with very beautiful windows on the side. I am in that room right now. And I can't imagine, and I have said to everyone who knows me, I will never in my life have a nicer office than I have at this point. It is almost surreal, and our students feel the same way. Our spaces are gorgeous, and I believe strongly in the power of space, in that when you feel good about the spaces you're in, it is acting as a participant in your journey. So our spaces, our classroom environments are challenging and encouraging students to be professional students, to think about themselves as academic in a way that for many of them feels a little bit new for them. So the space is not just a building, but it is just one of the players in what we're doing here in the upper school. So on the next slide, I have the who here, and it is there. You actually know these people. You don't actually know that you know these people, but you know them because they're actually the same Carroll adults that you have been engaging with for however long you've been here. So these dedicated educators are here to fulfill the Carroll mission. They're dedicated to students that are struggling in school. They are dedicated and rooted in GEC. They are language practitioners and math teachers that are thinking about language. They are people dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion. They are all the things that you already know. So even though you might not know them as individuals, I just wanted to give you a moment to know that the who is exactly what you already know. You know these people, and they know your kid. They don't know your actual kid yet. They hope to, but they know how the journey that your child has been on, and they're ready to receive them in that next step of their journey. So then there's the what, and here's a quick another kind of, you already know this. I love to start with our students and kind of what you already know. You also already know what. You have been here, and I'm guessing happy here because you're here now and still thinking about Carroll. And I would hope, I know that our students and our parents are happy with Carroll, and we are Carroll. So the academic program that Orton Gillingham, focus area, flex block, small classes, GEC, all of those principles that are the upper school as well, because we are Carroll. The focus on core values in the upper school, we're thinking about accountability, integrity, respect of all things, lots of respect of yourself. As students are transitioning to high school, there's a lot of new options that become available to them on a social scene that are not necessarily going to respect their bodies. And we're talking about those things as well in the upper school. We also have a strong commitment to DEI and social justice. It is embedded across our curriculum and in all things we're doing. We are in math class taking time each week to talk about mathematicians of color, to point out contributions that are happening in across professional domains by a diverse population, and really thinking about where have people been, not necessarily what's in our history, but what's been left out of our history. What are we, what conversations are we going to have, because they haven't necessarily been happening yet, in making students aware of that. But back to that, this what, and it's a bit different because really the biggest difference in the upper school is why. And thinking about a transition to the upper school is really focusing on the who, the what, but the why is special here. And the why is that we are now GECing the transition to high school. So we as an institution are GECing our students' weaknesses, right? Your child came to us with a challenge that we have been focusing on and working on. And I'm going to take a stab at the fact that your child has made tremendous growth and progress in that area. And many students are then ready to take that growth and progress onto the next institution. And then there's also just the idea that there's another area that we can GEC, and that's the GECing of the actual transition. And I'm going to talk a little bit now about what that looks like. I purposefully left the word transition lowercase, just so you know. I talk a lot about lowercase and capital or all caps transition. A transition from our 8th grade into a 9th grade at another school, to me, is an all caps transition. There is a lot happening. And I do want to say that there is still a transition from Lincoln to Wayland in coming to the upper school. And it is what I would call a lowercase transition. There is still, that who and that what is stable. And the structures and the how is where the students are going to feel a difference as they try on that bigger transition that's to come. So let's just go right in that. So this just opened up on my screen, and I'm not sure about you, but I just got a kind of a wave of overwhelming graphic. I would not use this with most of our students, but there's just this kind of, how are we doing this? And all of the areas that you have been thinking about for your child, the reading, the language, the reading comprehension, the writing, that is all here, but we're coming at it from a place of independent academic skill and strategies and tools that your student will be able to use independently when they are moving on from Carroll. And not that, of course, the 8th grade is doing that as well, but the focus of it in the 9th grade is kind of taking it to that next level. So for instance, our EF work is strictly focused on getting students to the point where they actually have what we call INCLU, and that's independent NCLU. So they work in a scaffolded way to move from the traditional NCLU model to conducting their NCLU time on their own in a room that is more independent and monitored and not so structured, because they don't need it to be. We're looking on that launching to what's next as far as managing their work, managing their materials, managing their time. That looks also that we have students have a study hall. They start off with one in the week. We're working on, you have free time and you're going to learn how to use free time, because depending on where your child goes, the school that I went to, a 9th grader had 18 free blocks in a week. That if you're, maybe I can't see everybody's eyes, but most eyes for parents are like, what? Like, my kid's going to play Xbox in the dorm, like all day. Like there's no chance they're going to do school. And we are working on scaffolding the use of that free time also with these independent skills. For writing, we are using the Empower writing method as a tool that students are able to work to write more sophisticated, to be taking their writing skills that they've been developing at Carroll and apply it across the curriculum. Our students are writing in every class. They're working on research papers, lab reports. We're scaffolding the lab reports so that by the time they're leaving our year of physics, they have written a full high school lab report that they are ready to leave, and they leave with a template on how to do that. So when they show up wherever they're going, they have a folder of Google Docs of, Kate's lab report template. We actually name it the name of the student who, is working on their own templates for applying these tools independently. The literary analysis, we're writing, taking those kind of that book report model into more concession assertion essays, thinking deeply about literature, the human experience, writing about it, understanding that they can make an assertion in literature that they support with facts from analysis of literature. And that is much of high school. And we are doing that here in 9th grade, and giving students that opportunity to get to that high school level of kind of writing in this environment, with our scaffolds in place. From the expressive language skills, this mostly looks as, what is active participation in class, working with students from the student who will not necessarily say a word in class at the beginning, to having, debates in history, as we are kind of scaffolding the debate structure, or a model of a structured conversation that's happening in class. It also was active listening. How are our students taking notes? How are they taking notes that work for them, that they're able to just do it on their own without being told, take out your notebook, it's time to take notes. Also for our students, this looks like hey, remember that strategy you learned in 6th grade? Remember that SQ3R model you used? That wasn't just for your 6th grade history teacher. That's an actual strategy that you should use now. Use that. And our students often need that just direct, this, and now is when you do it on your own. And that is a lot of what we're doing. The other piece here is just in academic credit. So we are teaching physics, which is a conceptual physics class. It is the physics content of what many of our local independent day schools in our area are offering in the 9th grade. And it is a transferable high school science credit. Same with our ancient civilizations. Ancient Civ is one of 2 primary 9th grade options that many schools are offering in the 9th grade year. Our English literature course is a transferable English literature course. It is both the skills of English language and also taking it into the literature discussion, kind kind of more high school focused English environment. And for math, many ninth graders are taking geometry. Not all, some are working on a stronger foundation in algebra. We have a algebra track that is either offering students a second half of algebra over the whole year to really cement the foundational skills of algebra to make that next year of math just go that much better. And for geometry, we have 2 levels of geometry, really focusing on the fact that there is an incredible language component of high school geometry that many of our students, even some of the strongest math students, will struggle with because of the vocab and the language demand of a geometry course. So our curriculum also gives students that opportunity to have that language heavy math class at Carroll School. And then there's this social emotional transition. I don't know if I'm going to go out on a limb and just guess that at some point all of us transition to high school. And when my mom was worried about homework and if I was going to be able to do the homework or if I was going to, pass my Spanish class, I was actually wondering, who am I going to sit with at lunch? Do I have friends? And I was worried so much about that the focus on that academic transition was just not really on my brain. I just couldn't, it just wasn't able to bridge. It was too much transition. So for our students, there's really 2 paths here. There are students who the academic transition can be the sole focus of the year. It's really where we're getting them the most. And the social emotional transition feels very accessible. They're coming to a place that they know, they're with people they know. They're also kind of broadening their social network with some new students as well, but they feel comfortable, right? So that they can focus on that academic. And then there's also students who the academic focus is still obviously really important, but that emotional transition, that commitment to Carroll, that feeling of I'm not ready, can really give us time to be working on bridging that, kind of trying on the fact that you are now, you actually, most of the people, a lot of students, but you don't know them all. You are going to practice getting to know new people. You're going to integrate into a new homeroom where half of the students were in Wayland for 8th grade and you don't know them yet. So there's a gentleness of that social transition as well that works for a lot of students. And I can say this with certainty, I am just this morning walked around to ask students, the students who came from Lincoln, and so many have mentioned that they just feel like the new friends they have had forever. Like they can't believe they weren't in 8th grade with them, where they're new. We are purposefully designing our advisories to be a mixture of Lincoln and Wayland 8th graders and also students who are new to 9th grade and new to Carroll, to create that both that comfort of someone and also that stretch of people who are new. And that's purposeful. So that's a little bit about the how. And then there's also just the kind of nitty gritty numbers of how. So we are still a 3-to-1 student to faculty ratio. Students are getting a rigor of their homework that is a big adjustment that is obviously supported, but it is aligning with many of the institutions that we are sending students to and helping them make that transition to more time and commitment to a homework structure. So our students are looking at about 90 minutes of homework. The 120 is kind of building in students who might be taking longer. Teachers are not assigning what they think is 120 minutes of homework, but there are students who report that. It's homework they can do. I have just the other day had a 9th grader say, just the pride in, I had this much homework and I did it. I can do this. And another student told me that hanging out with friends from town the other day, they were all talking about how much homework they have. And they could just join in and be like, yeah, me too. I was up, I did 90, and that sounds terrible from an adult perspective. Like, are you really bragging about all your homework? But kids are, and it's unfortunate, but we're giving them that sense of pride of this commitment that they're making, and that it is that they're being stretched in meeting that mark. We are, a year of high school course credit. So this is not more middle school. This is a high school year. And that's a really important component as far as the transferable credits that you will take with you, or your student will take with them to their next school. And as you know, it's this 180 minutes of explicit instruction focus area, flex block. They are being met where they are in areas that they need to be GEC'd academically, just as they have been in their through their journey. Some other this is our academic schedule. It is actually the rotating schedule of our middle school. I'm going to spend a little time on this outside of the fact that our students, as I mentioned on Tuesday, we have what we call X block, where we take their multi, and our students are taking multi out of the day, 1 day a week, for this supervised kind of structured study hall to practice and scaffold the idea of being free. It's really important to us that we're not just scheduling them every single minute of every single day where they don't have any opportunity to try on managing themselves in free time. It doesn't mean they're running around the building and, playing Nerf gun tag or whatever they do. They are in a study hall environment, but they have to make the choice of what do I have to get done right now? Is there a teacher I need to see because I need extra help here? They have a list of who's available on the block that they're free to see who they can go and make a meeting with. So we're working on the skills of independent free time. We also have a longer lunch than of any school I've ever worked at. And that's also purposeful. We're giving students the time to really have 3 different experiences. So they actually get to eat, they're playing, and many are meeting with the teacher, checking in, getting something done that they need to manage for their day. It also gives students who are participating in evening athletics or other outside commitments a chance to maybe get some homework done if they'd like to during the school day. So we do monitor a study hall room for students who might need that as well, and that's part of their plan for how they're going to be independent. Our executive functioning skill building, we are using a remote planner every day in homeroom or in advisory. Students are planning the homework that they have. They're estimating how much time they're going to need. They're writing when it's due. And eventually in the evening, they're then checking off if it got done or not. On the right side, they are scheduling during NCLU when they're going to do these things. So in every afternoon, they're looking at this like column on the right side and saying, okay, I want to hang out with friends at 6. I also have basketball practice at 5. I need to relax at 4. So I'm going to eat dinner at 7, and I'm going to get this homework done. I have students who I kind of check on planners. I had a kid the other day write grandma's 80th birthday. First of all, I was mostly impressed that the kid even knew that, and actually knew how old grandma is. And he just blocked off the whole night. And then I could see that at lunch, he wrote that he had to do homework. So he was predicting that there was going to be no time for homework. So he had to make the choice to use lunch to get homework done. And I almost took a screenshot to send it to the parents to be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So, it's not going to be tears after grandma's birthday that, you have all this homework that you didn't do. There was a thoughtful approach to when, and that's really important to us. And this is largely what is happening in our NCLU time. And we're working on students leave with a blank version of this that we work with them on transferring to their non-Carroll account so that they're using it in high school. I've just recently started doing some surveying of our current students who were here last year. And most of the students who have replied to me have shared that they are still using our planner. I had a student who in a IEP process with their public school wanted to make sure that, quote, using the Carroll planner was an option because she was so worried that maybe the school wouldn't let her use it. So it's a tool that our students are using independently and that we are want them to take with them. Every 2 weeks or so, we are sending home what's called an up form. Parents truly believe that this is for them, and it is. But the behind the scenes work on an up form is that each student and each teacher for that student fills out this form with the current grade, how many missing assignments there might be, or how many not yet. So a not yet is something they've tried, but not quite done, and a comment about how things are going. This is then, we have a block on Fridays where the advisor sits one-on-one with the student and checks in on how the student is feeling about the class, what the student is saying is reality. And then they're having this moment where they're checking that reality with the teacher's reporting, right? So if a kid's saying, oh, science, I have an A+ and I have no missing assignments. Nope. Like, you have a B, that's wonderful, but you do have a missing assignment. It seems like that's a miscommunication between you and your teacher. Let's check it out. It's also where the student is keeping their goal for their trimester goal. The advisor is writing a note and going over that with the student. And then the student is writing in that very moment a comment about what they feel after seeing this up form. So the student wrote, I am working hard, I need to email my teachers more. It then gets PDF'd and sent to the parents. Nothing that gets sent in this email has not already been discussed with your child. Your child is aware of it. You're also seeing your student's comment before you're just like, this isn't, we're very careful here that school is not something that is being done to these kids. They are why it's happening. They are the most active participant in it. So to have this be a communication that's just between the teacher and the parent isn't actually including the most important player, which is the student. And that's what these up forms really do. And it stands for update and plan. So the U is update and the P is plan, because given how this looks, the advisor will also write to the parents the plan for what will happen. If students have a lot of missing assignments, we have what we would call, Friday work session, where we offer for a family to have the students stay from 12 until about 2:30 for a supervised study hall, where they just leave for the weekend with those missing assignments done so that they're feeling better on Monday. It's not incredibly common, but it's common enough that it's something we kind of count on happening on Fridays. So that's our kind of parent communication. So here's where I say that, so now I know you love the upper school, because who can't? And if you're interested in learning more, the next part of this how is, how do you take this to the next level? How are you thinking about exploring this for your child? And ultimately, interested families should speak with your placement or your advisor, so Cece or Charlene, about your exploration of the upper school. And at that point, they will encourage you to reach out to Anne French, who will schedule with me. You could also reach out directly to me. I don't feel like it needs to be to Anne. Anne is a masterful replier. Not that I am not that, but kind of in the mix, Anne will just schedule you for a meeting with me at times that we have established as being that I'm available. It might be the fastest way to getting on my calendar. So at this time, I'm actually going to stop sharing and I think pass it back to Stacy for some Q&A facilitation.
Hey, thank you so much. And you're welcome to turn on your cameras or keep them off, whatever makes you most comfortable. We did get a bunch of questions in the chat, and I'll just kind of follow up on a couple of them right here. we got a couple around process. And so Kate spoke to, if you're interested in the upper school, communicate with Cece and Charlene, and reach out to Anne French and or Kate. And I think from a timing perspective, it's great if you do this in parallel with other schools. And if the upper school is your only choice, I think it's important to indicate that early on. Like every school, we have capacity concerns, and it's not to say that this is a hot rush today and now, but it can only sort of benefit you, even in the process of just sort of gathering information as well. And I'll also say, if you're a family that happens to be on financial assistance and so forth, we can carry that forward, but still always beneficial to sort of have us allocate those funds on the early part of the cycle. And in terms of, is there a formal application to the upper school? There is not, but Kate, I'll kind of pass it to you to say what happens once a parent contacts you.
So in some ways it's another GEC level. So I have parents who will reach out and ask to join with me and their child. They're already at that point. There are parents who are just exploring kind of on the side without their child, and I'll have a meeting, a Google Meet or a phone call. I'm also open to a under the tent on the backfield meeting. I am doing that as well. And then from there, it's including your child in the conversation. So having either a Google Meet or another kind of outdoor experience. It's seeing the building, taking a quick walk through to just see what it could feel like here. It is our hope that we can return to maybe where we were years ago, where upper 8th grade students would actually have a chance to come and experience the upper school. Don't know if we're not quite there because of COVID, and for all, even for both campuses, not mixing in that way. But that would be that next step as well. And then it's ultimately an enrollment. It's a kind of back to Stacy's team for that next step in continuing your Carroll enrollment.
And is there a component of assessment that's part of the student meeting? And how much do we look at sort of 8th grade and middle school data?
Mm-hmm. So we are looking, just internally through how we're sharing data that is happening on a continuum from the 8th to the 9th grade in some ways seamlessly. There's also a team meeting of the 8th grade team with the 9th grade team that happens in the spring to talk through the students that are coming to us around placement, where they, kind of in May, where are they in math? Where are they in language? What do they see as the greatest need for what's next, as far as our placement and scheduling? So much of our schedule is like many 9th grade experiences, it really, at every school I know of, the opportunity for elective classes across the curriculum outside of an art or a PE is very limited. It's very core content requirement heavy in the 9th grade. So for us, it's the schedule is really just still about the grouping. So what outside of math class, there's the English literature, there's ancient civilizations, and there's physics, and it's about how are we grouping students in those classes. Our history and physics, we are purposefully thinking through and speaking with Charlene and Cece on schools that you might be thinking about for next. Because if you're thinking about a school that maybe the groupings are going to be bigger, your child will be back in a kind of 15 to 25, we can scaffold a transition back to a larger class in our physics and history content areas, not too much, but having 5 classes of 5 kids isn't actually helping that transition to what's next, but having physics be with 10 to 12 is actually helpful. It's a class that we are meeting kids and it's super engaging. It's really fun, and giving them that environment of being in a bigger room So all of that is taken into account, even kind of what's next, because there has to be a next because we don't have 10th grade. So we're already thinking about that too in your scheduling.
That's actually really, really helpful because we did get the question of what are the class sizes in the upper school? And what I had said is that they're fairly similar to the middle school in many cases, but it kind of, and in the middle school, there are some classes of 12-ish kids in the content areas that you indicate as well, but we tend to be fairly similar. Yes.
Yep. And we are, so in language and in math, we are making the class sizes are still at the place of who needs that class, right? So, for instance, this year we have a geometry class of 10 because there are 10 ninth graders who needed that geometry class. If there were only 4 kids who needed that geometry class, we wouldn't just say, oh, sorry, we can't run that section. Let's roll them into the other geometry class to make it bigger. We would need to be balancing where is, content in kind of meeting the academic need and the size, where can that align? But we will run the math classes that we need to run if anyone needs it. In that actually could look like, if there was an 8th grader in geometry, which we were close to that with particularly with COVID and kind of self-study and, students who have been seeking out extra things like that. When that comes the day, we have a math teacher who's actually waiting for the day of teaching a one-on-one algebra 2 class. She cannot wait to teach algebra 2 to a 9th grader. And we would do that. That would be, GEC at a different way, I guess. It would be GECing in the area of strength. But that's what we're doing. So,
and then you bring up a really interesting point there, because I think one of the favorite things that I hear from upper school parents, both parents who've come from Lincoln and brand new parents, is we get in the lower, middle, and upper school, but there's an agility to the upper school that's a little different because we are a program of 42 students. And I have seen Kate Collins rearrange the schedule daily at times to switch people around and have things make the most sort of academic and when necessary sort of a social engineering sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's really quite remarkable. Kate is distinctively great at this, and I'll go to Kate's language with a capital G, not a little g, a capital G.
Thank you.
We did have a couple questions. We did have a couple questions. So the total size of the program is 42 students. We have 26 ninth graders, which is fairly typical to us. I think we've gone to a high of 30 at times. And we do have I'd call it between kind of 9, 10, and up to kind of 18-ish kids who go from Lincoln over to the upper school. And I will say, and Kate, you can speak more about this and about electives in sports. That's a question. But I would say it's very much of a community culture of the 42 students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's, I came from a school that had 700 high school students in it. And even exploring, even for me, the concern, I had that as an adult. Like, wow, this is small. What's that going to feel like? There's, it can feel as big as you want it to, and as small as you need it to. And by that, I mean the kind of opportunity for activity and what we're, how we're busing students for bounders, for after school bounders, and they're joining in with the Lincoln campus for that in the afternoon. Students are participating in, actually just the other day, I heard that there's a chance that we will have our own upper school basketball team, that we have that many basketball players that we'll have to run our own team. So students are engaged socially with each other in a really comfortable way, and with adults. So I want to say it's 42 kids, but it's 60 plus humans, and our teachers are eating lunch with the kids. I play Foursquare. I've actually gotten quite good, and to the point that I have 8th grade students who are coming to find me to see if I want to get in line for Foursquare. So we're, the 60 adults or the 60 people, 60 humans feels more like the language of our population, because there is such a community feel. And frankly, what brings all the adults back and how excited they are to be here is this kind of camaraderie and connection between student and adults. And Stacey, I don't know if that got to the answer.
Yeah. And then if you could say a little bit more about the multis, that'd be awesome.
Okay. Yep. So students take, it's a block in their day. It is all of our students take multis over a 2-block period. It is, we currently, now that we're on the middle school campus, we have one multis teacher from the middle school is coming to us on a rotation. So we just had Coach Kometz working with students in a PE class. We have internal people who are teaching multis as art in movement. Shay Chattel will be joining us for the next multis term to do a stand and deliver public speaking and drama course with students. And we have a rotation through the rest of the multis teachers who will be coming in. We've been surveying students for their area of highest interest to ensure that they're with that multis teacher when that teacher's here. In the middle school, I think there's a focus on multis being about exposure, right? So there's a chance to kind of try out a bunch of different things, and that's wonderful. Our multis program is largely actually about joy in your day. So what do you love, and how can I keep that a part of your day every day? And not to say that exposure isn't important, but given all of the academic and transition demands that we are focusing on, we are kind of focusing on that multi-block really being about, I need to move, and I should probably move every multis block for the whole year. And it doesn't mean I don't love art. I also like art, but it's not going to be kind of where I get, and of course they will do some art, of course, but we are also just working with students in some of that choice. So I believe there was a question about elective. We do have some choice in elective within our multis programming that's a little different than I think how the middle school is. And there's a flexibility. So in some ways, what is an Achilles heel of kind of our multis department being kind of a internal, I was teaching PE. I don't even want to call it teaching. I was playing with kids on the backfield and loved it. And there's, but it's the, I am not Mike Kometz. I do not have that background. So, but it doesn't mean it's still not great for kids. It's just different. But I think the students are liking that a little bit more of that freedom and that choice.
Kate, can you say a little bit more about what lunch looks like over in the upper school? Because it's quite different than in our other campuses.
Yeah, you know what, Stacey, that's a good question. I would have assumed it's just the same, but I think it sounds like it's not. So basically it turns into noon. I almost just said noon o'clock, 12 o'clock at noon o'clock is nothing. So lunch period starts, students are released from class. In our campus, both our, the building and inside the building, the back fields in our basketball court 4-square area are open and monitored for students to basically grab their lunch and just be free, kind of choose what supervised area they're going to be in. It's 45 minutes. So often students are kind of starting with eating, they're hanging out on the wall, they're kind of moving about campus. There's a bit more freedom. And Stacey, is that where I guess I don't really know what's happening.
No, that's exactly it.
It's more of an open campus, high school feeling of it, which we're really purposeful on because, and for all really good reasons, there's a monitoring of middle school that we are still monitoring, but we're kind of monitoring with and trying to do it in a way that they don't feel it. So of course we're monitoring, exactly. We are roaming, we're connected, but we're giving them a little bit more freedom in those break times so that they're, we're also not just saying line up and go to class. It is just, it's 12:45 and someone will say, dude, it's time, it's time for class. And they just grab their bags and run to class. And that practicing of getting where they need to be on time is also just a really important skill for high school, because chances are many of our students end up somewhere that is not going to just have a bell and a line of it's time to go to class now. Like, they're going to have to know what time it is and get themselves to class. We will work on, with the ninth graders, not even saying it's 12:45, go to class, just having them. I had a kid the other day looking around and he's like, where did everybody go? I was like, they all went to class. And he was just like hanging out alone on the basketball court and hadn't even noticed that everybody left yet. So there's lots of growth that can happen there. And that is purposeful.
That's exactly it. And even I think it's highly supported independence in a way that they don't exactly realize. And in addition, the sort of community feeling that Kate was describing among, like, the kitchen in Wayland is pretty much the nicest kitchen one could ever imagine, with a couple of sub-zero refrigerators and whatnot that we inherited when we bought the property. But it also has a microwave and a stove, and kids, students and teachers all kind of hang out and eat together. It's very much of the community of 60 that Kate was describing. One of the questions that we got also was about the transition to 10th grade. And, we face this every year. And I had a child who went to Carroll. Like, I know what this is, the concern about delaying high school and then starting in 10th grade, and or how many kids do 9th grade at Carroll and then consider a 9th grade somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to kind of break that into chunks. So on one of my how slides, there's this social transition to high school, or to not even call it, not to high school, because this is still this is a transition to high school in many ways, or in all the ways, I think, as well, but within Carroll. There's the social transition to 9th grade is when they leave Carroll, no matter where they go next, is going to be a big part of what your child's about to experience. The biggest difference on the 10th grade transition is that they will be a part of a smaller group that's entering. So for some kids, that can be difficult to be one of only a few who are new, right? However, I was at a school that entered in about 30 new 10th graders. The 9th graders that were already there are literally waiting at the door with their faces up against the window for those new students to arrive. The culture, in particular in the local independent schools, this isn't like you're a new kid. The new 10th grade admissions is a large component of many schools' entry points. 10th grade, while it's not the largest entry point, is still a big entry point to many of the schools that our kids are looking at for their next school. So I would say that is not to say not a problem, but it is culturally a part of the structures that are in place. Even locally, Wayland High School has a advisory for new 10th graders. So we had a student who left here, went to Wayland, and is in an advisory that's only other new 10th graders. So schools on the receiving end are incredibly purposeful about that entry. And frankly, and Stacy can probably account for this, as an entry point, it's a really important entry point for many of the schools as far as kind of building their numbers over time. There's that kind of that piece. And I think for many of our students, allowing them to just focus on the academic transition to high school, that's what the upper school provides, is that social transition is in some ways muted for them and doesn't have to be they don't have to be also worrying about that, where we really can focus on that academic and kind of behavioral transition to high school, outside of also that, who are my friends, where am I going to sit? Where in 10th grade, all of that can come up, but they can take notes, they can write a lab report, they can write a research paper. They're not also really worried about that academic transition too. And even the most, obviously, like I said, the high school transition, I worked at a school where 180 plus kids were entering what, in this kind of anxiety of the transition. It's transitions are hard. Doesn't matter who you are, what school you are coming from.
So we also had a question, which I can answer. It's about the sports program in the upper school, and I would say it mirrors the middle school sports. So all of those are available in terms of playing on those teams and so forth. And then, in terms of profile, right? So sort of who is the right student for the upper school? I would say coming from the middle school, there's a strong indicator that you could be the right profile. And I think we see a range of kids. We see some of our kids who could go on to a much more rigorous program and will enter the upper school because parents or themselves both feel they just need another year. They just need another year of Carroll, even though they are, not needing an Orton Gillingham tutorial any longer. And at the same time, we do see kids who still do require some Orton Gillingham, and some of those students go on to a Landmark or an Eagle Hill or a Foreman. So we really see kind of quite a range. And I would say, with the exception if your child's primary challenge has become more around the social emotional or the attentional, in other words, if it's evolved to be sort of different than what we do best here at Carroll, that would be the time for a conversation. But I do think generally students from the Lincoln 8th grade tend to be a match for the upper school. I just wanted to point out that we did put in the chat the contact information for both Kate and Anne French. If you wanted to reach out, it's over there. And then I have a question here. I think we've answered that. And then again, in terms of this, do they reclassify the 9th versus 10th? I would say when going to high school, I would say some kids go to 9th and some kids go to 10th. And I think it's highly individualized and really depends on your specific child. I think if there's questions, you should talk with Cece and Charlene. Kate Collins and myself also work very closely with families in the upper school about next school's placements. Sometimes it's really wonderful to engage the school themselves in that conversation and let them know, what, we're actually open to both of these grades. Where Charlene and Cece are often on the phone with the admission directors about just these conversations. I'll say from a financial aid perspective, it's good to kind of keep a wide net as well sometimes in terms of openness to the grades. And so I think if there aren't any other questions, Kate, is there anything I'm forgetting to ask you about? Charlene, Cece, anything that's come up for you all? Okay, wonderful. Well, Kate's information and Anne's is in the chat. And as always, reach out to Cece and Charlene or myself. We hope you found this useful. We're available for any follow-up questions. And we thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful day. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.